Well, I see you have arrived. I admire your courage. And who am I? Just think of me as your very own personal ghost host. I'm here to tuck you in tonight. So, lock your windows and doors, look in your closet and under your bed, and hold your blankets tight, and prepare for 6 terrifyingly true ghost stories. Let's jump right into our first tale of the night. It comes from someone that goes from being a skeptic to a true believer. It's called The Footsteps.
Ghosts are definitely not real. Those were my words, said before we started our trip up to the mountains of Baguio City. A group of delegates from our grade school department were going to a leadership seminar in one of the most haunted places in the Philippines, Teachers Camp. Plenty of ghost stories come from that dreaded place where we were about to stay for 6 days. It was known for its old age and the rumors that it was built on top of a war-related area. People see ghosts of war veterans and enemy soldiers kidnapping women. I thought I could never experience something like that, but I was wrong. First day of the trip was fun, as I remember. We went biking around the park there and hung out in the hotel room of one of the delegates' parents. I didn't even think about the place we were really supposed to stay until, of course, I saw our hall in Teachers Camp. The camp was enormous. Plenty of halls we could have stayed in. But of all of the halls we were assigned to Whitehall, the oldest and the one in the worst condition. The floor would creak with every step, and because of an opening between the ceiling and wall, you could hear anything from chattering teachers to the bags of others dragged on the floor. Our toilets didn't even work well. So every day, I dreaded coming back to that hall at night. The long-awaited first night in our room finally came, and as usual, I didn't sleep well. I always have difficulty sleeping whether at home or a creepy camp. Room 109 was our assigned quarters. 4 other girls stayed in the room with me, and they were comfortable with the place, just a bit disgusted at the counterproductive toilet. Anyway, as I was saying, I didn't sleep well at all. I was awake until the hours of 11, desperately trying to sleep. Of course, I left the lights on, fearing something might go bump that night. Finally, I fell asleep for around 4 hours and woke up again at 3 a.m. The heck with sleep, I thought. Luckily, I brought an interesting book from my sister. I read undisturbed, yet still a bit paranoid for a few minutes. Until I heard something. Footsteps. Faint, yet coming closer. I stopped reading and waited if they'd actually get louder. They did. Before anything got any louder, I actually peeked outside of my room, finding nothing, but the footsteps kept coming. Stronger and closer as it headed down from the stairs across the room. I went back to my bed and just stayed there, sitting upright, my ears eagerly taking in the footsteps. I was nervous. I tried to calm myself, saying that there were late guests coming in. But then, the footsteps reached the entrance of the room, so roughly that I felt the bed move whenever it sounded. I freaked and hid my head under the blanket, hurriedly reciting my prayers while my friends slept soundly. I feared I'd see something that I'd remember for the rest of my life. The footsteps felt as if it was coming towards my bed. Then it stopped. I lifted enough courage to look up from my blanket. I saw a white, shady figure with a somewhat bloodied face. It was only for a few seconds, until I finally got the urge to hide myself from it. I hid under the blanket again. The footsteps ensued, but this time grew fainter and fainter until it was gone, like the figure. I was so scared I could barely get to sleep. For the passing days, in room 109, nothing else happened. I told my friends about this ghostly experience, and they laughed about it. I know what I saw, whether it was a ghost or just my mind playing paranoid tricks on me. I still go to Teachers Camp, and I still hear stories of the hauntings, even ones similar to mine, but hearing or reading ghost stories can never amount to the thrill of experiencing one.
Well, if you're happy, we're happy. But you know what? I bet the ghost was just jealous of you. Think about it. You eventually will go home, but the ghost gets to stay in that crappy hall for all eternity. I'd be cheesed off too. Our next one takes us to Korea, which is probably why we named it the Korean Haunting.
I came to South Korea to be with my husband who is in the army.
I have been here for 5 months. I have been living in my apartment for over 4 months. About 2.5 months ago, I started getting the icy feeling like I was being watched. This went on with no happenings until last night. My husband is training in the field. I am all alone in the house. Just like any other night, I got changed, went into bed, and called my husband. I got to sleep around 12:30 a.m. I slept for about 2 hours when I started having a dream that I have had before. But instead of what normally happened in the dream, an unknown force was on my back with 2 handfuls of my hair, holding me down. I woke up to find that my head where, in my dream, this force had my hair. I blew it off, thinking it was my imagination. I fell back asleep a short time later. The dream resumed where it had left off. This happened one more time before I decided to just stay awake. It was about 5 in the morning. I am not exactly sure. I heard a Korean man's voice talking. It was very deep. I could not make out any words that I know. It sounded as if he were hissing the words. By this time, I was already terrified. I heard knocking and my chairs being scooted around. This went on for about an hour. Then it started scratching my walls. It started soft and short at first. I ignored it until it got harder and louder, increasing a lot every time. Finally, I could not take it anymore. It felt like my heart was going to burst. It was beating so hard. I got up and turned on all the lights in the house. It stopped. I got dressed and looked around to find all my chairs moved, little things moved, and then I saw the scratch marks on the wall. It was about 6:30 in the morning when I left. I am looking for another apartment, and there is no way that I am going to stay there and let it keep getting worse and more violent.
Gee, I'm truly sorry you're going through this. This ghost does not represent the rest of us. Hey, do you want me to have a little chat with him? I mean, I do have a ghost-to-ghost network after all. Next, we have a story from a young lady that is going through a truly horrifying experience. It's called The Nighttime Ghost.
One night when I was in the bathroom to brush my teeth, I was nowhere near the sink, and it turned on by itself and turned off again. I got my toothbrush, looked in the mirror, and saw nothing. I looked again and saw a white glare in the mirror that was behind me. I turned around and nothing was there. The light kept flickering on and off by itself. No one was in there with me. I opened the door and ran out. My sister said nothing happened to her in the bathroom. At night, when I had to go to bed, I kept tossing and turning. I was restless and kept thinking about the bathroom incident. I put the blanket over my head, but my feet were out, and I felt as if someone was in the room with me. I felt someone was grabbing my toes, squeezing them gently. I was too scared to look. I couldn't move. It felt like I was paralyzed. I could feel someone on the bed with me. I was so scared, it felt like someone was on top of me. I tried to scream, but it was holding my throat. I was still under my blanket, and it was still on me. I kept trying to scream, but I could not. I also heard footsteps in my room. It finally stopped. I got out of my covers, and my throat was in pain. I finally fell asleep, and in the morning, I was better. I told my sister, who didn't believe me. I could tell my mom secretly believed me. It happens to me every night. I'm so tired, I can never fall asleep. I keep asking my mom if we can move. I hate waking up every night.
Wow, that sounds truly horrible. Here's hoping the ghost buggers off and lets you get some sleep. Next, we have a tale from someone that would share an elevator ride with a young boy every night. It's called Little Boy Blue.
Have you ever had an encounter with a spirit, an entity, or something paranormal, but you were not aware of it until someone told you so? This is such an experience that I had in the office when I was working late. So before I start the story, let me get into the details first. My name is Matt. I work in a call center here in Manila, Philippines. So since we have to adjust our schedule to the country we are catering, most of us in the call center world usually work the graveyard shift. So on with my story. I had this experience with a little boy in the elevator. He was about 3 feet tall and was always wearing blue. We would always share the elevator during my break at 3 a.m., and he would always go down on the 4th floor, My office was located on the 6th floor, by the way, and I would always bid him goodbye, and he would just walk away without saying a word. There were times when I tried talking to him, but he would just put his head down and wouldn't talk. So I was scared that I might offend him with my talking, so every time I see him, I just kept quiet. So after a few encounters with the kid, I started thinking of certain things. 1. Whose parents does this kid belong to? And 2, what is he doing in the building during those hours? So after a few days of not seeing the kid anymore, and with some luck, I finally had the chance to catch the guards downstairs in the lobby to ask them about the kid. Because usually during the graveyard shift, they would do their routine rounds on the building. What happened next made the hair on the back of my neck rise. I told the guards that I have been seeing a young boy on the elevator and asked who he was and what he might be doing in the building during those late hours. One of the guards smiled and said, "Little boy Blue, 4th floor, right?" And I told him that he was right and asked what was on the 4th floor. "Nothing," he exclaimed. It turned out that the 4th floor had been vacant for 3 years now. They also told me that sometimes when they are making their rounds, that they would spot the boy on the 4th floor running through corners of the hallway, and when they turned to look where the boy went, they would find that no one is there. I can feel my face turning pale and my heart pounding with fear. After that, I never had an encounter with the kid anymore, but sometimes the elevator still stops on the 4th floor, and you could hear a giggle of a little boy in the cold and wide hallways of the Harrison building.
Well, all I know is, ghost or not, that little guy is up way past his bedtime. Our next story deals with a haunted factory. This one is called The Haunting at Reed Candle Factory.
My aunt works at Reed Candle Factory and has many stories to tell about her experiences there. She told us that one time she was in a room of the factory working the machines when she heard the sound of a man whispering, even though at the time she was alone in the room. Another time, my aunt told me that when she went to work, it was an early shift, so it was only her and another woman there. She was working the machines when she looked up and saw the figure of a man in the factory, but it was only the shadow, not the details and everything, so she could not really distinguish him very well. She didn't describe him, but she did say they are pretty sure that the founder, Peter Reed, still visits the factory, and my aunt is also pretty sure that the man she saw was the founder. Another time, she was in the factory when she could sense someone watching her from somewhere. Although my aunt looked around, the other workers were working and didn't seem to notice the very heavy but pleasant presence, the way she described it, somewhere there. Also, my aunt told me that, one time, she was working when she felt a cold chill pass through her, although the central heating was on at the time and there were no windows open in the factory. I think that along like everybody else, it is indeed the founder, Peter Reed, still visiting his beloved factory, and that he is harmless, which is why my aunt told us that she was used to all those happenings and that they no longer bother her, but give her pleasure. Well, that's all she said.
Man, I gotta tell you, there is nothing worse than having a boss looking over your shoulder, except maybe if that boss is a ghost. I mean, you can't mess around or anything. He'll know, and you'll definitely get into trouble. Well, it looks like we have time for one more story before bedtime. It involves a 16-year-old that truly had a night to remember. It's called The East Window.
I am 16 years old, and before I can remember, my family have always insisted on weekend trips with friends into the country or to the coast. So when the October holidays, 2 years ago, came, we were off to the Woodhouse homestead in the Adelaide Hills. I've loved old buildings ever since I was little, but upon reaching this particular house, I couldn't help but feel a little resentful and nervous as I entered the front door. The homestead was a 2-story building, with numerous dorm rooms upstairs, a large kitchen, and an attached outhouse. It was dark before the first of our friends arrived, and I seemingly jumped at every shadow that moved. Fortunately, soon the house was filled with adults' chatter downstairs, and children's laughter as they raced each other up and down the staircase. My friend Mel and I were setting up her family's room, number 4, upstairs, while all the children were now downstairs, delighting in ghost stories told around the parlor fireplace. I had gone upstairs with an armful of bags to the room, while Mel was left downstairs trying to convince her mother that she should have brought her hairdryer. When I reached the top of the stairs, I found the air cold, and I immediately stopped to put on the sweater which was around my waist, thinking that someone had left a window open. I picked up the bags again and continued around the corner to face the open door of Mel's room. There, near the window, I saw a woman. She was not white but looked sickly pale, and I called out to her. For what reason, I don't know. She turned to look at me once, and then exited through the window. The window was closed. I was so freaked out that I dropped the bags in the hall and sprinted downstairs, unable to verbalize to anyone what I had just seen. The next morning, after a restless night, in which I am sure I heard wailing and crying, I was the first awake in the house. Getting dressed, I found myself walking down to the front hall and opening the guest book on the table just inside the front door. In it, I found a description of a tragedy from the late 1800s. A man, who had owned the house, had been pushed out of the east window by his jealous new wife. The man, it seemed, had been spending time in town with a mistress. The young wife had thrown herself out the window after her beloved when she realized the full extent of her actions.
Wow. Talk about can't live with them, can't live without them. But it always saddens me to know that pain and sorrow does not end when your life does, but it continues. That was some scary stuff tonight, wasn't it? But do you know what is not scary? Hitting like, subscribe, and sharing this video. It'll really help us keep the ghosts at bay. And of course, if any of you have a story to share, then by all means, drop me a line in the comments. But I do want to thank you for stopping by, and I hope the stories we told won't be giving you too many bad dreams. But if they do, then maybe you shouldn't run from them. After all, sometimes it's better to embrace your nightmares